welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and as you can see, we're in festive mood here on the Passenger Seat Podcast. Peggy's all decorated up with her Christmas garb, and I'm in my Christmas jumper, and yeah, we're actually on our way to my parents' house to drop off some bits and bobs that were picked up from the trip up to Northumberland for this year's MMOC Young Members Christmas meet, which was held up at Beamish. But I had a little bit of longer time up there, spent the whole weekend up there. It was a 487 mile round trip about, and yeah, so going to tell you guys all about that today whilst on the way to my parents to drop off these goodies. So as young members, we're really fortunate that one of our young members, Nathaniel, who helps me with the kind of day-to-day running of the young members, works at the brilliant Beamish, which is an open-air museum that is up in technically County Durham, and is basically a historic collection of rehomed buildings. So it's built on a big dip in the landscape, so quite well protected from wind and stuff like that, but has kind of taken in a load of buildings that were once elsewhere, were going to be kind of demolished or removed, and put them on display in a museum where you can walk around and experience kind of replicas of historic streets from lots of different eras. And Nathaniel has recently been employed in their newly developing 1950s town that they're building, and he regularly takes his Morris Minor to work with him and enjoys working on the 1950s section, and he has a couple of characters that he portrays whilst there. And because of this connection, he was able to have a talk with his boss about the idea of having a Christmas meet at Beamish. And we've actually been talking and thinking about it since last year, because I'd seen all of the brilliant displays of like Christmas lights and festive Christmas displays at Beamish, and absolutely fell in love with it. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be brilliant to have a Christmas meet there to enjoy everything, especially with their new 1950s section, and to get to explore all of the beautiful festiveness of all of the houses and towns and buildings, etc., that they have on display there. I've not been to Beamish in years and years and years. I can't even actually remember it, because I must have been so young if I did indeed go, and so it seemed like a perfect idea. So we floated the idea to Nathaniel. Nathaniel thought it sounded excellent, and they have been letting a few car clubs display on some of the later periods that are there. So they've got 1900s town, 1820s, they've got a coal village, they've got the new 1950s section, a 1940s section, so loads of stuff. And like I said, a lot of the buildings are replica, rebuilt using a lot of the original materials, and moved to be preserved at Beamish. So we've spent a year or so getting this all in the works and planning it and getting people excited about it, and I think having that idea from so far in advance really helped with the fact that Beamish is obviously quite far north. For a lot of us, there was a lot of driving involved in getting up there, but people were really excited about the opportunity that it offered, and so people were really keen to come along regardless of the distance, which was really reassuring and brilliant of everyone to do. So my experience of the weekend, having not had to do all that much chasing and organising, because I kind of let Nathaniel take the reins with this one, which was quite nice, was getting in contact with some family that I have up there, and seeing if I could go and stay with them. I think a lot of the young members were all staying in a Premier Inn near Washington on the A1, because it was quite close to Beamish, but also quite direct in terms of where they'd all travelled up from. And I think the large majority of us travelled up on the Friday night, or Friday day. Some people made a big trip of it, given that it was going to be quite so many hours of driving. A lot of people decided that they were going to take the kind of whole day to travel up, stopping off at some interesting places. There's a lot of us in the young members who are quite enthusiastic about all the different services that are available and service stations. So people were making the most out of the journey up on the Friday. We left a little bit later than everyone else, and also had a little bit further to go than everyone else, because we were staying a little north of Newcastle with my uncle and aunt. So we had a little bit further, so we didn't get up there until I think it must have been 9 o'clock-ish. But it was a really decent journey up. We basically followed the A1 all the way up, and I reckon I've covered over the last month or so almost the entirety of the A1, having done the A1 all the way down to London for the RAC last month, and then kind of gone up from ours towards Newcastle this trip. So we followed it all the way up to Scotch Corner, and then did the other part of it kind of coming down to Beamish the following day. Got to Scotch Corner, and then did the A68, because of the roadworks that is up near the A1, near the Metro Centre and stuff at the moment. And yeah, the A68 was a real experience in the dark, and also being incredibly hilly. I've got a lot better at driving Peggy in more challenging hilly conditions, and I do really kind of enjoy the challenge of it all, but it being in the dark added a whole new challenge in terms of, obviously if you've got like Google Maps open, you can tell when a bend is coming up and you can make better predictions about what gear you want to be in, but seeing hills in the distance makes life a lot easier when you're kind of pre-planning in a classic car. And obviously when it's dark you can only see as far as your headlights go, and Peggy's headlights are quite good, but I wasn't able to see every single hill that was coming up, but we made it, including the incredibly tricky hill where we were going up at, I think it must have been about 15 miles an hour up near the Derwent Manor Hotel. So if you know that area, you will know what a challenge that hill really is. But we made it and got there with relatively little issue, so that was good. But again, those roads at night with people's main beams being left on, lots of challenges. But we got there, got ourselves settled in, and my uncle and aunt have got a new puppy, so we had a lot of fun meeting the new puppy and playing with him on the Friday night, and then it was off to bed, ready to get up nice and early to head over to Beamish for the following morning. I wanted to make sure that I was there for plenty of time, and so we set off, I think it must have been about 8:15, and that gave us time to put some fuel in Peggy and get to Beamish with plenty of time. We needed to be there for about 9:30. Beamish opens to the public at 10, and we had to be in position on the streets with plenty of time before the public started coming in and walking round. We had hoped to do a little bit of controlled driving round on the streets, but because there's still so much construction going on in the 1950s town, and also because Santa was apparently doing his rounds on his sleigh during the weekend, they were a bit more hesitant about having us drive round. But as it was, I think it would have been quite a faff anyway, and it meant that we could park the cars up and really enjoy our day. So everyone arrived just about on time, and then we formed a kind of orderly queue in order to drive into Beamish. And it was honestly such a surreal experience to kind of leave the staff car park where we'd all met, go in and just kind of follow the road round and drive through the 1900s and past the big carnival and everything, and then land up in the 50s. We felt like we were in little time travelling Morris Minors, and same thing happened much later in the day when we started going around on Beamish's buses. They were really time travelling little buses. It was quite fun. We were joined as well as by 16 young members and 7 cars in total, by John Carroll from Minor Matters, who I told about the event. We do tend to keep the young members events to being published in the WhatsApp group, so we advertise the WhatsApp group and advertise when we've done stuff in Minor Matters and in other places, but to find out about these things you have to be in the WhatsApp group, just because we try to make sure that it is the young members who get priority in coming to these things, because we were going to be limited to an extent on the number of cars that we could fit on the street and the number of people that we could get to the Christmas dinner and all of that thing. So if you're wondering why you didn't hear about this beforehand, it was because we were keeping it somewhat under wraps, but we thought it would be a pretty good thing to get a nice coverage of in Minor Matters, and knowing that John lives further north, he might want to come along and get some photos of us and experience some of what we'd got up to that day. So we invited him and his wife to come along, and they got to ride into the street in Nathaniel's car. We were helpfully overrun with 4-door Morris Minors, which meant giving people lifts who had only been able to come up to in a modern, or their Morris Minor had let them down on the way and they'd had to come by train, or flown in from Northern Ireland. It meant that it was a lot easier to get people in and out and about around the event. So once we driven in, we had to get everyone parked up. There's kind of 2 main streets to the 50s area at the moment, but they've got quite a bit more coming. And so 4 of us ended up parked on the kind of shops section, and 3 outside the police houses and 1950s semis. And then we started to pose for some pictures, trying to make the best of the period backdrop, having a bit of fun, posing for some kind of stage stuff, and generally making the best of the situation. And I think we all had quite a bit of fun. It was a cold and grizzly day in terms of rain, but we were all making the best of it. Once we'd got the bulk of the photos that we wanted, people started to split off to go for a wander round. We had initially set up a bit of a rota to have people out and about standing by the cars, but given the weather and how cold it was, I think we gave up really on that by about lunchtime, because it just felt a bit unfair to have people standing out and about around the cars. And as it was, Beamish wasn't quite as busy as I think it would usually be. It was still very busy considering the weather, but we felt reasonably happy with just leaving the cars and leaving the public to admire them, and they definitely did. There was a lot of people who seemed to really enjoy seeing the cars parked up on the street. Some people who had been around the cars whilst the public were looking around them were having some fantastic conversations about the young members, about the cars, and also about the fact that it's the 75th anniversary of the Morris Minor. The other thing we've done is ask everyone to dress up in period clothing. it meant that the photos that John was taking were extra fun, but also that we were able to kind of have some pretty fun interactions with some of the public, and also some of, I guess, the actors who work at Beamish. And so, like, when we went to the coal pit village, they thought that our outfits were quite fancy and quite swanky, and we said that we'd kind of come round on a time travelling bus, because there's a bus and a tram that go around the exterior of Beamish, for you to get round to all the different sections, because it's reasonably well spread out. We'd also organised to have some fish and chips for lunch. They have a replica 1950s fish and chip shop, which is fantastic and uses beef drippings in keeping with the period, and also I believe the fish and chips fryers are all coal powered and stuff like that, which is really cool. And they were some really tasty and really fantastic fish and chips, all things considered, which was very nice. And we were able to kind of get everybody out, and then John took some great pictures of us all enjoying our fish and chips as well, which was quite fun. And even again, though it was still raining and grizzly, we enjoyed the warmth of the fish and chips, and also the chat that we were having around the cars, and seeing the people who were also queuing for their fish and chips, queuing around some of the cars and taking them in. It was quite fun to, as we found with a lot of the Young Members events this year, when we end up at a museum, it tends to be that groups of us start walking around together and enjoying the museum together, and that ends up making some great photos, some great chat, and also just a nice way to hang out with your friends, because we're so fortunate that these cars have resulted in us having some really great friends and people to hang out with. And I always look forward to the Young Members events, because it can be a long time between some of them, and to catch up with everyone and get to spend some nice time with each other walking around the museum is always fantastic. And it was just such a fantastic museum. I was overwhelmed with the fact that the people who are kind of the actors in most of the scenes were so well informed, knew so much, and were so helpful and interesting to talk to. We had a really interesting chat with a gentleman in the 1900s kind of garage about calcium carbide, and we had a great lesson in how money was moved around, like department stores, in that section as well. We had a really lovely chat, me and Jamie, in the 1950s semi with the gentleman that was there, about the kind of restoration of the furniture pieces and stuff at Beamish, and how that all works, and what they hope to achieve when they take on pieces like that. And also just massively enjoyed the very comfortable sofa that they had in there, and my plea to try and get more Art Deco sofas in future might work, because Jamie definitely seemed to enjoy how comfy that sofa was in there. And what again was fantastic is that all of these sections and buildings and houses and everything were all themed around Christmas, and had appropriate period Christmas decorations, which was great, and I absolutely loved it. So we were there until 4 o'clock, and we had a great time. A big group of us queued up for some of the bakery bits and pieces to try out, which was hugely popular. I spent far too much on the gift stalls. Managed to get myself a set of Beamish top trumps, which, if you know me, you know is hugely exciting. And yeah, just had an absolutely brilliant time going around and learning so much stuff about history whilst kind of being really surrounded by it. Beamish closes at 4 to the public on a weekend, and by that time it was really starting to get quite dark, so all of the Christmas lights and stuff were looking really spectacular. We had a table booked for 5 o'clock, just round the corner, and so we were given permission for the last hour before all of the staff went home from Beamish to make the most of the street and to drive our cars wherever we wanted and get some photos as long as we were safe in doing so, which was very, very good of them, and I cannot thank Beamish enough for that, because everybody had such a good time driving their cars around, taking photos, getting group shots, getting in and out of like the period garage and taking photos. I went round and got as many pictures with as many of the Christmas decorations as I could, and it was just brilliant, and it's such a unique experience to have been able to have, and definitely a highlight for a lot of our ownership for the people that were there, to be able to drive our cars around such an immersive experience of different periods was just so cool. And then we all managed to head out towards the fair ground that they've got there and have ourselves all lined up and then ready to head up to the Black Horse, where we'd booked our Christmas dinner, and they had brilliantly given us access to a little room upstairs, well, quite a big room upstairs actually, which I think they must do like breakfast with Santa in under usual conditions, but we'd got the room to ourselves, and we were able to have a really brilliant Christmas meal together, which was very special. What was funny is that we had a bar upstairs to ourselves, and given that we were all quite smartly dressed, and the majority of us, I think all of us actually, under 30, the barman was quite confused as to why there were so many of us in tweed jackets, but then we just explained that we had been to Beamish for the day in our 1950s and 60s cars, which I hope made just as much sense as his options did. But we had a fantastic time. The meal was lovely, and again, great to sit down and share some of our stories from our travels up, our stories from the people that had stayed in the hotel the night before, lots of other stories, and of course talk about the brilliant day that we'd had at Beamish. Then it was time to say goodbye to each other and go our separate ways. Some people was heading straight home, some people were going back to the Premier Inn. Myself and Jamie were going back to my uncle and aunt's house, so we headed back there, back along the A1 and up across to them, and again experiencing some of the tiny dark roads of Northumberland in the pitch black, but we made it and had quite a fun drive regardless. Following day, we packed ourselves up, spent the morning with my uncle and aunt for having a lovely dinner at another pub with another one of my relatives up there, my aunt, and then I got to do a lot of driving around places that I'd done a lot of driving as a passenger growing up, so visited some places that I could remember from childhood, some places, some families' houses and stuff, and got some photos of Peggy in all of these places that I remember spending a lot of Christmas periods growing up. So to have Peggy there for those was fantastic, and it was really nice to get some pictures of her there, especially as once I'd done the maths about how many miles and stuff we'd done, I realised that this is probably Peggy's last really big trip anywhere before the restoration work begins on her, and so it was quite special for it to be up and around somewhere that I remember doing lots of driving and get to experience driving a lot of roads that I thought looked really fun as a passenger. So that was really special, and also showing Jamie a lot of the places that I've spoken about but he has never seen. For him to kind of get to see them was really cool as well. For example, there's some redwood trees that are up near the church that my gran used to take us to, and I remember telling Jamie about these redwood trees very early on in our relationship, and him saying no, trees shouldn't be squishy, they should be that must mean that they're mouldy or that they're rotten. And I was like, no, they're definitely squishy trees up there. And and a lot of the places that we've gone on holiday in Peggy have had redwood trees, and I've been able to show him them, and to then be able to take Peggy to what I see as my original redwood trees, and Jamie get to squish these trees for the first time was very cool. So that was really nice. And then it was time to head home, so we left kind of our last stop up in Northumberland at around 3 o'clock. Managed to get to what I consider the last Greggs on the way home in Towlaw to pick up some stotties, which is some of the goodies that I've got down here to bring to my family, and then head home. And we made pretty good time on the way home, and got home around 9 o'clock with just one stop after Towlaw at Blythe services. But yeah, it was a fantastic trip. Peggy behaved faultlessly. We managed all the hills brilliantly, and it was a really special trip for so many reasons. So yeah, that was the Young Members trip to the north, and probably our most northerly trip that we've done, and just a fantastic one. All things involved in it, and all the people that came along. A huge thanks to everyone who brought their moggies along. We did have 8 moggies, but one of them wasn't period appropriate to be able to go on the street, but they had a fantastic time bringing their car in after hours in order to take some photos regardless. So yeah, this will be a challenge to try and remember everyone, because it was probably our biggest attended Young Members separate thing ever, which really goes to show the pull of having such a great venue as Beamish, and such a great opportunity as being able to take the cars on the street like that. So obviously it was me and Jamie in Peggy. We had Nathaniel obviously and Lily, who had come along in Sarah. We had Elliot, who had driven up Alison, and he had picked up Dara and Sarah and Freya, who had all come either via aeroplane or via a more modern car. So he'd absolutely filled his moggy. We had James, who had come along in Moog. We had Lewis, who had come along in Agnes. We had Josh and Andy, who had come along in Bert. We had Matthew, who had come along in Grace. We had Michael, who had come along in his moggy with Sam, and I don't think his moggy has a name, but I might be wrong. And then we also had Ben, who had hoped to get his moggy up there, but had whole alternator problems on the day, but made some great lengths to get there regardless via train and everything instead. And yeah, I think that's everyone. Just wow, it was a brilliant day, and so thankful for everyone coming along and being part of it. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about it and hearing about our trip up north. There will be plenty of photos going up on everybody's Instagrams, and if they're tagging the MMOC Young Members account, then they'll be shared, but also on my account I'm going to be making a little Instagram highlight with any photos that people tag myself and the young members in, for people to be able to see all the brilliant photos that people are able to take. And I'll be sharing lots of photos of some of the other stuff that I stopped off to take photos with up north. So yeah, brilliant. And it's not long now until Christmas itself, so I hope you are enjoying your cars in the best festive way that you can, whatever that might be, and looking forward to all of your festive car presents or whatever that you're hoping to get. But that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about it, and I would highly recommend going along to Beamish, even if you can't get your classic car displayed like we did, especially at Christmas time, because it is such a brilliant experience. It will be cold, wrap up, but you can't beat it. It was absolutely brilliant. But in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.